Don't you just love it when you're at your friend's house and then he's like, "What do you want to drink?" And then he just says that they only have tap water. Like, why even offer me the option of choosing my drink if all you have available is disgusting, nasty tap water? I would even take a Diet Coke with absolutely no gas in it over tap water, okay? And then don't try to give me those disgusting ice cubes that have been sitting in your freezer for like 2 weeks. It literally tastes like old toilet water. Not that I would know what toilet water tastes like, but I'm just gonna assume that's what it would taste like. Anyways, all jokes aside, that's kind of how I feel with this entire McFarlane situation. Everything has been playing out very slowly, and honestly, I'm kind of tired of it. I've moved past it. Yes, it is incredibly sad, and personally, I would like to see McFarlane keep the license just because I'm already knee deep in a lot of his collectibles at that 7-inch scale. But it is what it is. I think we have to be able to move past it, and enjoy what we can while it's here from McFarlane, and then eventually get ready for Mattel and make that hard choice. Are we going to pass up on the Mattel universe, or are we going to follow McFarlane blindly? I think that's really the question of the day, but that's a conversation for a completely separate video. In today's video, I thought that we would talk about some kind of semi-breaking news here. We actually do already have confirmation, or kind of semi-confirmation back in the day, that McFarlane was going to start releasing TMNT action figures. However, we now officially got confirmation stating that there is a partnership there. But we did see like a promotional image, I believe, last week of a TMNT figure, a 5-inch TMNT action figure from McFarlane. I'm not sure why it is 5 inches, but we did get a closer look at one of the toy shows. Now, what's crazy, or the toy fair, what's crazy is that nobody was allowed to take pictures or photograph or do anything near this little area. I'm not sure why it is. I wasn't there personally, but there is quite a bit of testimony to that. But we did get a small little tiny clip from one of the best content creators that was at the toy fair. If you guys want to check out his content, I'll definitely post a link in the description. But I was able to catch a little snippet of what was on display, and they do have, it appears, like the first wave of TMNT action figures from McFarlane, and you can't really make it out, but it appears there's a Shredder all the way in the back, and then Bebop and Rocksteady towards the right side, if I'm not mistaken, and then the 4 TMNT figures up front. Now, the real question here, obviously, is what other collectibles we're going to be getting from McFarlane. Is this an exclusive deal? Is this going to phase out NECA and, like Super 7? Or are they all going to cohesively unite and still make TMNT action figures? That's really the question here. Personally, the TMNT line has always been very open. They always have multiple different manufacturers working on them, even if it's like the same scale. A perfect example of that is when they had Super 7 and NECA making action figures that were the same scale. So I think that's something that we're going to see from McFarlane. And who knows, maybe this is a completely different scale. Now, in my mind, and I'm hoping that these are like young versions of the TMNT characters. Like maybe we're going to get like teenage versions of them, so they're not like full-grown turtles. Well, they're not really turtles, but they're not like full-grown mutated turtles that practice, being ninjas. They're essentially like the younger version of like the marquee or the prototypical versions that we're used to from like animated series or the comic books. That's what I'm hoping it is, but there is a slight possibility that these figures are going to veer closer to the 1/12 scale, just because, again, doing my math in my head, like from comic books or even the animated series, usually Rocksteady and Bebop were a little bit taller than even I think Shredder and Bebop were close to the same size or the same scale, but usually the TMNT figures, if they were the younger versions, were considerably smaller. So we could assume that like Rocksteady and Bebop are closer to like 7 to 8 inches. So that makes me believe that they're either 1/12 scale and they're just smaller versions or younger versions, and that we're going to see this kind of play out. Now, personally, I know there's like the Loyalist or whatever the manufacturer is that has the TMNT line at that 5-inch scale. I'm not a big fan of it. I've said this before. We already jumped in the deep end with McFarlane at that 7-inch scale, and it's almost unfair that he's making us jump in on another scale. Now we're gonna have to do the 5-inch. Is that what we're being told here? Now the figure does look really well designed. There's some extras that you can swap out here and there, and then also, not to mention, there will be a comic book included with this particular figure. So we now know 100% confirmed because of the toy fair that we will be receiving the first wave for these figures. Now, what's interesting is that you weren't allowed to take pictures or record. I'm going to assume it's because the deal wasn't like finalized. They were still working out the final details for whatever the deal was going to be, the contract between these two big entities. And so I'm just going to assume that that's why it wasn't finalized, so they couldn't actually show off the product until Paramount had, or Paramount and McFarlane had come to like a decisive contract or a decisive agreement here. So as I said, there may be some better images down the road, but that's all we have right now. It's like a tiny little clip. There's a diorama there, and then they make them essentially put the camera down. There was also another big announcement, and I'm going to assume that it's the same situation. That's why they decided to not show the new Mortal Kombat figures. I'm going to assume that that image that we've received thus far was somebody just kind of sneaking in a camera to one of the panels or to one of the showcases, and I'm going to assume it's because there's some sort of deal that hasn't been finalized yet. They still need like an approval from the people that actually own the IP. That's what I'm going to assume, and that's why they weren't able to actually showcase the figures, or they were showcasing them but nobody was able to like take pictures or record. But it does appear that we're going to be getting some new Mortal Kombat figures in classic colors, classic designs. I'm going to also assume that this is just reused from the older Mortal Kombat figures, which I think they were based on the Mortal Kombat 11. Pretty exciting stuff, considering the Mortal Kombat 11 series, most of those figures are like really difficult to acquire, and some of them are like super madly expensive. I've seen some of these go for like as high as like 150 to 180 depending on the character. So there's definitely quite a bit of demand, and for those people that are hardcore fans of just the video game in general, they're going to be happy, but also fans of the classic designs, the classic color schemes for these characters. I think it's pretty intriguing, and it kind of makes sense for McFarlane because you already have the body molds, and then a lot of the paint or the details back in the day were much more simplistic because it was pixelated mostly. You couldn't really see the costumes too well, so he can kind of take some liberties if he just wants to give us like more bland colors with not as much detail, not as much paint, not as much shade work. I think most of the fan base is going to be okay with it because, as I said, there's no real accuracy. It's pixelated characters for the most part. And then lastly, we did get something kind of snuck in there, which is a new Elite series, I think is what they're referring to it, from McFarlane, which is essentially like super articulated or at least super detailed action figures that come with a plethora of different accessories, soft goods, extra weapon accessories. And I believe the first two figures we're going to be getting a Diablo character as well as the Doomsday guy from Doom. Now, we don't have like legitimate confirmation on the price point, but according to this interview, there was supposed to be a price point of like $60 if I'm not mistaken. So for $60, I'm just going to assume that this figure goes all out. It's going to just go berserk mode. There's going to be, like I said, soft cloth goods, interchangeable hands, interchangeable weapons, maybe some new head sculpts attached here. So, and crazy amount of paint apps and just really fine sculpted detail for a $60 price point. I'm really hoping. I'm trying to be very optimistic because this could turn into like a maximum Spider-Man situation where there's definitely a lot more to be added into the packaging, but it just doesn't quite add up to that price point. So that's what I'm hoping, especially with the Doomsday character. Are they going to just reuse the old Doomsday and then add a bunch of paint apps and like a few extra sculpted details here and there, or is it a brand new body mold with new articulation scheme? That's what I'm hoping for, because if it is just a reuse of that Doomsday guy, there's gonna have to be a ton added to this figure to be able to match up to a $60 price point. And I will say this entire situation is very intriguing for a number of different reasons, and primarily because we just saw the Maximum Spider-Man be released or revealed by Hasbro, and that one also has a $50 price point. So it appears that some of the regular manufacturers that we know to be like at that affordable price point, at that $25 to $30 price point, they're now starting to want a piece of that pie when it comes down to the upper echelon of collectibles. And I think they're going to be trying to take away business from a lot of these imported manufacturers. And I'm not going to make any assumptions. I'm not going to tell you guys that this is going to be an absolute home run and that these figures are going to be perfection. I still feel like there are going to be issues here and there, but ultimately unfortunately, only time will tell whether some of these collectibles are going to be worth that $60 price point. I just think it's fascinating, and it's going to open up, an entire new conversation. Very similarly to what we had with the Maximum Spider-Man, I think the exact same situation is going to play out here for McFarlane. And so I'm not going to make any assumptions. Once we see images, pre-orders, once we start to see more information on this new kind of little subline from McFarlane, then I think we'll be able to kind of make our assumptions and, give our opinions. But overall, some pretty intriguing stuff happened at the latest Toy Fair. A lot of stuff to dissect, a lot of stuff to break down. I'm hoping that I can do it this week, or in the weekend I'll probably do a video kind of breaking down everything that's been happening. But I just wanted to kind of touch on some of the more radical announcements, or some of the more radical sublines coming from McFarlane here specifically. So if you guys have heard about any of these figures, are they interesting to you? Are you interested in seeing a TMNT line from McFarlane? I'm very curious to see what the community has to say. What about Mortal Kombat? Do you guys want to see more classic color schemes and costumes for the action figures? Let me know down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of rambling content, make sure to stay tuned. Stay safe out there, and as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the number one most important thing about the hobby. Enjoy it. Pose your action figures, play with them. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.